Gaming in the modern age is a reality that even 20 years ago would be almost impossible to envision. Multiplayer experiences with thousands of players connected seamlessly in online worlds. Visuals that more and more I find myself squinting at the screen trying to confirm that it is indeed a game or real life footage. Virtual reality taking immersion to new heights with AAA blockbusters and profoundly interactive experiences.
He just trundles back down there.
As we covered in the first episode of Gaming in the Modern Age, the industry now pulls in over 150 billion worldwide and has reached out to amass fans across the globe. But with such wide reach, and with it endless potential for customers, heads were turning. Some with clearly nothing but dollar signs in their eyes. Today, we take a look at the monetization in 2022, and how you, yes you, could avoid getting caught out by greedy corporate shenanigans. What I want to achieve most of all in this episode is to hear from you guys, as with monetization especially, each of us have different expectations and opinions on the subject, and I would love to hear what you guys think about some of the topics in today's video. Please don't hesitate to leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and give the video a like if you enjoyed it. With that said, let's dive in. Looking at my YouTube metrics, I'm being told that around half of you may remember a time from your childhood where you would save up all your pocket money and finally make the trip to the store to purchase a game you had been looking forward to. Reading the back of the box, yes, box, while on the trip home feeling excited that the item you're holding came with it so much potential for enjoyment. Enjoyment that was guaranteed to have a credit screen, but also a complete product. Flash forward a few years, and my personal first experience with additional content, aside from the expansion for Diablo 2, which I'm just realizing now, god damn it, was with the Elder Scrolls Oblivion on the Xbox 360. What's quite fascinating about this title in particular is that within the DLCs, in the early days of it, was both a fantastic example of both the huge benefits of paid DLC, as well as the now infamous example of its darker side. The Shivering Isles expansion for the Elder Scrolls Oblivion was great. A huge amount of additional content to play through with a brand new storyline to really expand the customer's experience with the game. On the flip side of things, there was also horse armor. The selling of horse armor back in the 2006 game quickly created a backlash from its fans, with Bethesda charging $2.49 for the option to deck out your horse. $2.49. Oh, how far we have fallen, my brothers. And became a meme of gaming DLCs. Was there memes in 2006? Pete Hines, the head of marketing for Bethesda at the time, was quoted saying the following when asked about horse armor DLC in 2012.
The reaction to horse armor wasn't about the price. It was more of a lesson. When you're gonna ask somebody to pay X, do they feel like they're getting Y in exchange? If they don't feel like they're getting their money's worth, they're gonna bitch.
Aside from the clearly obvious worry that something being good value for money being news to Pete, I can't help but laugh at the last sentence. What, was the PR team just not around that day? Yes, Pete, that's definitely the way you should phrase that. Little did we know that both the great success of the Shivering Isles, as well as its hilarious shitstorm around the horse armor, were but a mere spark of what was to come in the 15 years to follow. Now, before we dive into the darker side of things when it comes to paid content and microtransactions, I want to make sure that I point out that not all content that is sold in addition for the paid for price of the game is created solely with profit in mind, as some artistic integrity still remains with this model, with examples such as the Blood and Wine expansion for The Witcher 3, the Old Hunters for Bloodborne, as well as the numerous additions to Fallout New Vegas, showing that not every company is out to simply execute a cash grab with a slowly dwindling number, still choosing to learn the lesson of making Y suitable quality to expect the customer to pay X, as Mr. Hines so eloquently put it. And there's an argument to be made that if the player gets both value and additional time played, as well as a similar tier of quality provided by the base game, that its success as additional content will come down more to personal preference over categorically being an attempt to shake customers out of more cash. Where the real malevolence starts to manifest is when the monetization practices not only start to erode the value of the product while still retaining its previous pricing, but also, as we'll get onto a little later in the video, when companies go as far as brushing against illegality in its attempt to swindle as much as it can from unsuspecting gamers. I mentioned before about my rather nostalgic flashback of holding a new game and it being a complete product. And yes, with examples such as The Witcher, we can expand our enjoyment through additional purchases, but I would bet that nearly everyone who watches this video, Gaming in the Modern Age, has played a title at some point where they have bumped face first into a paywall of some kind. The practice of splitting a game into as many sellable sections as possible is most hilariously showcased in the modern Sims releases, with EA seemingly rummaging around in their loft for a while, grabbing a bag of random objects and then slapping a price tag on them like a yard sale for a loot goblin.
That's it. Nice and hot. Yeah, boy.
And it only takes a casual glance at their practices in sports games to see the damage that EA's desire for a bottom line has done. Another extreme example can be seen in the game Dead or Alive, but there are so many marked up assets, I can't figure out whether this is a legitimate attempt at a Guinness World Record, or the terrible fallout of dropping cocaine into the office water cooler, with Dead or Alive specifically choosing to split their game into hundreds of pieces totaling nearly $700, in place of the format of the previous 5 releases, where the customer is expected to pay only once to experience all of, if not the vast majority of the game. Practices like this truly take away from what could actually make up the original product, with some even going as far as to ask players to pay to see the final act of the game, as shown in the title Azura's Wrath, where players were handed a price tag if they wanted to see the final fight in the game proper. Yes, that actually happened. A lot of times it would be hard to call the additional content expansions when the game itself has been trimmed down intentionally to accommodate for it, actively reducing the value of the original purchase in light of making sure there's enough to repackage and sell. Some push back when additional content was found on copies of games, and I frankly don't care, as long as the product that I paid for is complete and has not had elements stripped away from it because of it. The sale of ludicrous numbers of separate editions of games added even more hurdles to customers that simply want to buy a product and be happy in the knowledge that they have what they need and aren't missing out. Watch Dogs famously boasted so many alternative pre-order and special editions that customers actually needed a spreadsheet just to figure out what they were trying to purchase. And although the more contemporary releases have calmed down slightly, it does, coupled with the previously mentioned paywalling of content, take away from a genuine anticipation for upcoming releases, and breeds a customer base that has to be continuously on their toes not to get caught out by these tactics to maximise corporate bottom lines. It does on reflection make me feel for the much younger gaming fans today. As opposed to the cartridge and the majority of the CD-based era, kids I imagine are far less likely to pick up a game for the weekend and get to fully enjoy it without some fear of missing out focused online stores or their buddies boasting to each other they have the coolest $12 skins going. With video games now making so much money, of course there'll still be companies that their desire for their product to be financially successful will be coupled with a healthy dose of passion and desire to actually create a product that is highly enjoyable and of high quality. But for every company with those values, there'll be 50 more who look to provide the bare minimum to perpetuate their ability to siphon funds from players for as much as they can. Cash shops in games, from my experience at least, are quite a divisive topic when it comes to the wider player base, as more frequently, especially when it comes to MMORPGs, cash shops are an expectation as opposed to an unexpected addition. And this is where I urge anyone watching this to let me know your opinion down in the comments. No, it's not some YouTube spiel for clicks. I'm really interested to see where people are at on their opinion on in-game cash shops. Practices that appear today, such as heavy monetizing of games that are not free to play, and even charge a subscription, would have been torn apart not a few number of years ago. And it makes me wonder where the line is between a company justifiably setting up a monetization model to compensate them for the live service game, and when it, in the mind of the average player, drifts into becoming simply too much. Is creating a bottleneck or hindrance to gameplay to push sales of subscription models something that players are happy to manage, over the subscription model having a more traditional value in providing additional content over impacting it as a whole? Would you, as a player, prefer to pay a required subscription each month if by doing so you would know that all of the content would be obtainable in the game and that you would not be faced with any additional or optional paywalling? One thing that can't be ignored, and one thing that I have noticed going on in the discussion around cash shops, is the clear division between gamers with varying amounts of free time available to them. Someone in full-time employment with 3 children would be far more likely to get value out of an XP boost, for example, or paying a small amount to unlock content that the players with far more spare time had to work to obtaining in-game. On the flip side, those players that work to achieve the now purchasable reward or item could argue that it would take away from their efforts now that everybody in the game is running around with the same reward that they worked hard to obtain. A good example of this can be seen in games such as the fairly recent Resident Evil 2 remake, where the in-game rewards for achieving the brutally punishing S+ rank were not a few months into release sold to all players for a small fee. And I'm definitely happy with that, and not salty at all in the slightest. I definitely didn't make a whole document to optimize my attempts and runs to get the S+, and I spent weeks doing, spent weeks, I'm not salty. I mentioned at the start of the video about what we as players can do to help the ongoing dive into cash shops and paywalls. It simply comes down to not losing sight of where your personal preference and tolerance of monetization is. If you don't mind spending a few quid to get a leg up, great. If buying a game in multiple sections boils your blood, fair enough. And if battling through restrictions and hindrances created to create a problem that you then have to purchase the solution for isn't something you worry about too much, then that's okay. I'm just one person. I can't speak for anyone else. What I will say though, is that when you feel like that changes, to remain vocal about it. Forums, social media, and even things like Steam reviews. Left unchecked, the desire to print more money from video games has endless potential at damaging the whole industry when it comes to our experience as the customer. Most individuals pulling the strings on monetization either don't really care about gaming or don't know enough about it to know when it's killing the customer's enjoyment. Now I know what some of you may be thinking, and believe me, I'm not saying gamers should declaim their entitlement and march around barking orders and how they demand this and that, and the developers need to reap rewards for their efforts. But if the dial swings too far the other way, it could lead to borderline exploitation becoming the industry standard, and leave the door open for those that simply want to line their pockets, and in turn destroy this pastime that so many of us love. Your opinion matters. Thank you so much for watching. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Warhorse Studios, who after the release of my last video commented and shared it on their various social media platforms, and it was amazing to see, especially since my video wasn't simply being sycophantic over the game and actually covered some of the negatives. It says a lot for a company to embrace content like that, and I really wish other companies would be so receptive and have such a great sense of humour. Check out the videos on screen for all sorts of RPG content. Thanks again for anyone making it this far into the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Brilliant.
And a bandit that in his final moments just had to bust a move with the anime body.